I'd like to call the Senate to order, please. So we have an exciting agenda today. I want to make a few remarks before we get started. First, I want to make a remark about just a procedural change to handle some of the business of the Senate. We're going to be implementing a consent calendar for certain policies that pass through the Senate. Generally what happens is the policies go through some sort of process, and they come to the Senate from the Policy Advisory Council. This is one of the President's councils, and they're charged with ensuring that the policy proposals go in front of the proper constituents before they get implemented. Then after they come out of the Policy Advisory Council, they come to Senate Exec, and Senate Exec makes a recommendation to me as to whether a particular policy is academic or not, and if it is academic, whether or not the Senate needs to take action on it. We decided that it's a good idea for any academic policy for the Senate to take action because we want to ensure precedent is met in the future when we talk about related academic issues. And so, but we don't want to necessarily talk about things on the Senate floor that don't need discussion, things that are non-controversial. So what we're proposing is a consent calendar by which policies which are academic but Senate Exec thinks need no time on the Senate floor, they will be put on the consent calendar, and then senators can look at them, but they will be passed en masse at a future Senate meeting. But a senator, really any two senators, so basically a senator and a second, can remove any item from the consent calendar for discussion on the floor if they so wish. So you will have the power to discuss these if you think that they're important for us to have a discussion. All you need to do is find another friendly senator and let us know. In order to do this, we actually will have to pass legislation to put this in place. And I think that what we'll do is introduce that legislation at the next meeting. So be prepared for that. All right, I also want to talk a little bit about the business of the Senate and what we have been talking about and what we're going to be talking about today. And this is the notion of reports versus legislation. This is a deliberative body, and so far we have not done a lot of deliberating. We are going to discuss a motion today. We're going to discuss the motion on expedited tenure process, but we will not vote on it today. I know that some people feel like if we're not voting all the time, we're not doing our job. I don't necessarily have that viewpoint, and I personally like the reports because they provide context so that when we do vote on things, we have a little bit more information. So for instance, today we're going to hear from a task force on honors at the university that was put together last year. This task force really, the report is really about honors as a whole at the university, so departmental honors, not just the Honors College. However, there are potentially some changes coming to the Honors College, and so this report is basically some foregrounding so that when the changes to the Honors College, if they come to the Senate, and depending on what the changes are, depends on whether or not they have to come to the Senate, but if they do, then we'll have a little bit more information to make wise decisions. So I personally think reports are important, but there will be more action items coming forward in the next meetings. We do generally have a policy or operating procedures which say that if business is introduced, it's introduced at one meeting, discussed at another meeting, and voted at the third meeting to give you an opportunity to talk to your constituents get opinions, feedback about whether or not you want to vote for the legislation or not. All right, now I'm going to move to a maybe more controversial issue. So I want to talk a little bit about free speech at the university. I don't want to get too deep into it. I don't really have a super strong opinion, not because I don't think it's important, but in the academic context, I'm a mathematician, and we don't teach controversial topics very often in mathematics. So, well, I guess fundamental theorem of calculus. But what this means is I don't have to deal with a lot of the tricky issues that members of other departments may have to deal with when they're teaching in classes. And so I don't want to necessarily interject my opinions about something that I don't have to do, right, and tell you how to have these tricky conversations. But I do want to talk a little bit about the free speech of students. We have a large number of students in the room today. And there was an event a couple weeks ago where a group of students interrupted the State of the University address and basically shut that speech down, and now are facing discipline for their action. Now they're going to, during the open discussion period later, they're going to give us some of their thoughts and opinions about how the process has unfolded. But what I want to talk about is maybe just a little bit more philosophical about the purpose of disciplining these students, and whether it's the best thing for the students themselves and whether it's the best thing for the university itself. I would argue in this case that we as a university are a family, and these students are part of that family, and I think it's important to make them feel more included in the operation of the university and not less included. So I would argue that what we need to do is, instead of punishing them in this particular situation, to perhaps lay out some guidelines as to what is expected behavior for future events, but really to say, you are welcome here, you are wanted here, and we want to hear from you. I've invited a group of the students from the student collective to come talk to the Senate at the next meeting, and they have accepted. And so we'll hear more formal remarks from them next week, but I expect that we will also hear remarks this week from them during the open discussion period of the Senate meeting. Finally, I want to talk a little bit about expedited tenure process. We are going to talk about this later, but when I'm chairing that part of the discussion, I can't really steer the conversation, so I just want to provide a few bullet points of how I've been thinking about this. So the story is basically that if we want to be able to hire extremely senior, extremely eminent scholars, that we need a process that allows for us to hire individuals with tenure and have that offering of tenure be as close in time to the actual offer of the job as is possible. Right? So the idea here is, if we wanted to hire someone extremely famous, we don't want to say, yeah, sure, you can come, but you're not going to get tenure for a year. Right? So the provost has asked to put in place some sort of faculty-driven process by which the faculty still maintain the same level of oversight on tenure as they do in the process which is outlined in our policies and in the collective bargaining agreement. So the provost asked me if I thought this was feasible. I said yes. I asked that it go through the Faculty Personnel Committee. This is the committee that does the tenuring right now, and for them to come up with a proposal or work with the provost's office in order to come up with a proposal that the FPC was comfortable with, and then to bring this proposal here. Just a few points to keep in mind when we're discussing this is, currently, the president of the university has the ability to unilaterally grant tenure to anybody. Right? He does not want to use this power. He has said this. I believe him. We as faculty, I think, also do not want him to use this power. So I think it is in our best interest to produce some sort of process that allows for expedited tenure that is a different process than the president just unilaterally doing it. So this would be my argument for why we should do this. The second thing I want to say about this policy, or the proposed legislation, if you look at it, if you haven't, you can see it on the Senate website right now, so you can read the complete details, and we'll be flashing it up later during the discussion. But faculty have complete control over the expedited tenure process in the following sense. If the group of faculty on the smaller committee, the expedited tenure committee, whatever it's called, the ETRC, right, if they decide that for any reason they don't think that an individual tenure case should go through that process, they can kick it back and make it go through the full process, the original process outlined in policy and outlined in the CBA. So for unilaterally, so actually I think that this actually gives the faculty a great deal of control. It says basically if we don't want to use this thing, we don't have to. I would suggest that there are situations where we would want to use it, of course, but this actually maintains a great deal of faculty control, and I think this policy is a good thing just to keep faculty in the loop. All right, that's all I have to say for the moment, so I would like to pass the microphone to Provost Banavar, who's going to give us some of his opinions about the expedited tenure process and talk about other things that are happening at the university.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm so happy to be here. I wanted to just take a few minutes and talk about a couple of items that are going to be discussed here today. I noticed that Jeremy Piger and Josh Snodgrass are here, and they have worked very hard, and they have come up with a report about honors seen as a whole on campus, not just the Honors College, but generally speaking. And I've had the pleasure of reading their report, learning about the situation here, and I think you will find it very informative, and it tells us what areas we need to look at and what we need to do. And this particular report is going to be timely because we are also in the process of possibly a change in the Clark Honors College. We have an interim dean, Karen Ford, who is looking hard at the future of the Honors College, and there are some issues there because it turns out that while it's a real gem for us, we get some outstanding students. There are also some small problems. It turns out that we have resident faculty who come mainly from a few disciplines, and even though I'm told that about half the students want to pursue natural sciences, there are very few resident faculty from the natural sciences. It also turns out that the curriculum is not very easy to change, and there are things like that that need to be addressed. And Karen has been discussing it with a broad group of people, and she says that she will be presenting some possible ways of moving forward on this. And what I was planning to do was to actually go and visit the Honors College people and get their input, and then try to figure out what the possibilities are. And of course, we will keep you in the loop on everything. Nothing is going to happen without very broad consultation. But that's something that will happen, and I think Josh and Jeremy's report will be quite useful as a context for doing that. And as Chris just mentioned, there is also the question of expedited tenure. And the way I look at it, if we want to recruit top-notch people, we always have a hard time competing with other universities to do that because of salary, startup, resources, things like that. And one of the ways in which we might have a competitive disadvantage is if the tenure process takes very long. We have an absolutely wonderful FPC committee, and it's headed by Boris Botvinnik, who is here with us today. And they have just been really, really helpful. And so they, along with the Senate leadership and other people like Scott Pratt, have looked into this process of expedited tenure. And the idea simply is to have a process in place where it would be faculty-driven, where we would really keep all the principles that we uphold so dearly about tenure, but at the same time try to be able to do it quickly so that we don't delay matters and we don't lose somebody because of a delay in the tenure process. And so there is going to be a proposal presented to you, and undoubtedly there may be changes that you might all want to make in the proposal. And I'll be very happy to hear your feedback, and I'll be very happy to work with all of you so that it continues to be a strong faculty-driven process. So those are the two subjects that will be talked about, and I will be around for the rest of the meeting. And if there is anything else that you want to hear from me about, or if you have any questions, we can maybe address them later on, unless you have something right now that you would like to ask me. Super. Thank you all very much.
Thanks to Giant for that. Before we turn over the meeting to the discussion on the expedited tenure process, I just want to see if there are any objections to the approval of the minutes. Hearing none, the minutes are passed. All right, so let's bring up Boris Botvinnik, the chair of the FPC, and whomever else he has brought with him to discuss the motion, and then we will have a discussion from there. Thank you, Boris.
Again, good afternoon, and thank you very much for, good afternoon, and thank you very much for letting me speak here. And I have to confess, I'm not, this is maybe the first piece of legislation ever I tried to sponsor in any Senate in this world. But I think this is, probably does have some shortcomings, and it's not a perfect one. But let me give you my personal kind of take on that, personal motivation. When a year ago we all heard about Nike campus, then I thought maybe this is great opportunity. Of course, it would be for me as a professional, it would be great to have new research center in mathematics. But I could imagine that so to hire. So now we have opportunity to hire the best people in the world. Best people in the world. Think about this. This is a lifetime opportunity. And then you go out and you approach this person and ask, okay, do you like Eugene? Yeah. So it's clearly you see that person is interested, and this person is quite high up in the in the scholarship world, and you tell him, what, we have to go through this tenure process. Can you secure, please, 3, maybe 4, let's better 5 letters of recommendations, and I think it would be really not quite productive. So I think so the current situation is such that occasionally we have to do some urgent considerations in the FPC committee because of different reasons. So one of the reasons is we hire high administration, somebody from high administration, or high-profile person. By the way, I would like to mention here, if we are not aware, that the only Nobel Prize winner, which is a member of our university, is not tenured, because it's so it would be difficult for him to go through all these things. What I'm trying to say that by the way, there is one more important source when we have to use this procedure, when we go after high-profile, underrepresented minority scholar. And I don't know, my personal impression, and I've been around in this university since '93, my personal impression that at least in the last years, the mutual trust between administration, faculty, and everybody else is actually going up. And I would like to tell you that I trust your opinion as the Senate, and I believe that we all have the highest goals in our mind, and we'll figure out how to make it work without compromising our standards. And I'll be happy because maybe I won't be able to answer all questions, but I do have some people who may help me to answer all questions here. Thank you very much. Yes, please.
Wait for the...
Just a second.
Senator Murray from the College of Education.
I have several questions. So
Sure.
I hope I can do them quickly. One is, this is a relatively old challenge here. When I was a department head, I would have wanted to use this process in times and could not. So one question is, why have we had this process the way we've had it for so long? So even our dean, when we hired our dean had to go through a tenure process. And so is there a reason why we've had it?
Well, I believe that a certain conservatism is good in this system, and then I think it was historically it was done for a long time, and but I believe that we have different really situation or different environment here. So when we really can go after the best people in the world, and not just for new Nike campus. And I think there is understanding now that it's not kind of big challenge between faculty, professorship, and administration, that we all have the same goal. I'm not sure it was the same goal 10 years ago.
Okay, and then is this 100% based on anticipation, or have we actually lost people because we didn't offer?
I don't know. I don't have a good record of this, I have to confess. I would ask for help.
Okay, another couple of quick ones.
Just a second. So just a second. Because it's,
Actually, I don't know of any cases we've actually lost, but I do know of cases where we have almost lost people. And in fact, these are things I don't want to talk about, sort of recent years, but there have been people in the mix who have said, why are you making me go through all of this? And I think a good example of this is actually our provost, who in the process of being hired had to write and rewrite. And you've spoken about this before.
Yeah, I did not say, why are you making me go through this? I just said I'm very nervous that I won't get tenure, that's all.
I guess my last two I'll try to combine is one of the hallmarks to me of the tenure process is external review by as independent a reviewer as possible, reviewers as possible, and I don't see that here. It seems like, the way I read it, it could be like recommendations. It's not the same as asking for letters from independent reviewers of someone's work. And there could be other reasons. I mean, obviously, when someone has a very strong publication record, is world-renowned, that's obvious. But there are other things that can come up from letters sometimes that are very important from independent letters.
I guess the whole kind of the point here that this process could be applied in the situation when things are obvious in the sense that recommendation letters say for, I don't want to bring up any examples, so it's so say in my field, in mathematics, there are several mathematicians I would love to see here. It's and they don't need any recommendations. And if this is a general consensus of the whole department, then a general consensus of the dean, then I would actually rather trust them than to lose such a person. So this is my personal opinion. It doesn't mean that it's every word here is actually could not be changed.
So can I break in just real quick here?
Sure.
Because I have suggested to the provost, and I think in practice, in principle, he has agreed that the expedited tenure process would be activated if the department, the dean,
Yes.
and the office of the provost decide that this is the right thing to do. And the reason that I wanted to include the office of the provost in there is because the provost is actually here for the conversation, but not all of the deans and all of the colleges are here when we're discussing why we want to do this and in what situations we think this is applicable. And so I don't want to necessarily leave it to the deans who might just forward any senior hire to this process. This process really should be for individuals who are really preeminent in their field. And so I had made that suggested change. I don't know if it's reflected in the language here, but I think that is a change that everybody.
Yeah, actually, I agree with this. So it's a.
More questions?
Yes,
Comments?
please.
Bill Harbaugh.
So I had two questions. It doesn't look like this would require that the candidate getting expedited tenure review would have tenure at another university. And that was sort of what I thought was the motivation, was
Yeah,
that
that's,
if this was a
that's,
person who'd already gone through review and had external letters and so
Yeah,
forth.
that's one of the kind of. It's easy to give example of somebody who is working at the research institution, where tenure is not, so say Berkeley lab. So they don't have tenure. It's a federal institution, and then several Nobel Prize winners are there, and they don't have tenure. So I think this is kind of easy case when you can make such an offer.
So I see the argument that not only would they not have tenure, but they also would not be able to demonstrate teaching effectiveness, for example.
Yes. So then we have to realize that when we'll have Nike campus, not every person there or every faculty there will have the same type of teaching duties, and this has to be done very carefully, case by case. If this is the if it will require serious teaching, we have to go to some. This is why we have this subcommittee has right to turn this into a regular process and then request some evidence of teaching excellence.
So then two things that might be considered, because I know we're in the phase where we can add things to this without formal motions. But one is that the FPC's annual report should include information on who went through the expedited.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
That it's clear.
Actually, I think it's very important to make it transparent.
Yeah, and then the other thing that maybe should be considered is that if there are people who are on the FPC but are not on the ETRC, maybe there should also be some way for them to raise objections or have some input,
so it's,
if possible.
The way it will, it may happen this year that we'll all, so the whole information will be shared with the whole committee, because right now, I don't have formal right to form such a committee, so we'll have to do the same, same type of thing with all committee.
Additional questions or comments? Senator Imami.
Finance. I have two questions. I'm not the tenure track faculty, but just concerned about this. What are the safeguards for this system or process not to be misused? And number two, why should a world-renowned researcher or faculty be concerned about tenure track?
Sorry, second question again. What's the...
Why a well-known researcher or faculty who's known internationally or globally be concerned about being a TTF?
The first question, what are the safeguards? Well, it's if we think seriously, so what's going on? So every a decision like this is made, there are several stages. So at the first layer, the departments say unanimous about this. Then there is a college, and college supports this. Then provost. Then this is a group of people of FPC committee. They sit and decide and they vote. And so if there is abuse, it should be abused at every stage. So I don't believe that, say my department would get together with the dean and with provost, and we would decide that, so let's kind of abuse the system. And so it's always, so there is a serious element of trust here, and this is very important, because without this, I don't think we can actually do anything. We have to trust our department, we have to trust our deans and provost. If administration will decide to hire somebody else, they actually have this right. But on the second question, I'm not sure I understood the real issue here. So we're talking about tenure process for hiring, and so maybe I didn't understand your question, but in some cases it's not required to hire a person and give a tenure.
Senator Fried.
Yeah.
The question about independence did raise a little bit of concern. Thinking about cases I'm aware of where people are able to be extremely productive, be world-renowned, and certainly put together a list of very, very strong letters, and nonetheless have, when asked by independent reviewers, have questions raised regarding their integrity, either in their treatment of students, such as possible sexual harassment or discriminatory behavior, or the integrity of their academic work. And I've seen that happen. And so I'm wondering, with the goal of keeping things fast, if it might be possible to add in some sort of process that involved telephone calls, where there'd be at least two people who are selected to be independent, not asked to write a letter of recommendation, who would be called and asked if they had any hesitation or concerns about the university's plans.
Thank you for the comment. I think it's a very important issue. And my understanding, actually, I never, was part of the hiring of this at this level, but my understanding is that in practice it's happening now anyway. But it would be good to put some requirement for that. And moreover, we have to then give a kind of record of that. So somebody, okay, I talked to this and that, and I feel absolutely confident that this is a great person. Or, I'm sorry, but I cannot confirm that. It's so, yeah.
Senator Garcia-Caro.
Yeah, thank you for putting this proposal together. I think the conversation has been very interesting so far. I'm looking at it from the viewpoint of as taxpayers in the state of Oregon, and this being a public university, and previous experience, especially with some golden parachuting administrators who came through here for about 6 to 12 months and retired, inflating our PEB expenditures enormously. And I'm just wondering whether we might actually have, all of a sudden, an array of very distinguished retiring academics coming through Eugene for their last year of their careers, and all of a sudden incurring us into a forever deficit on someone who we've only seen briefly. So could we put some safeguards on this so that we actually, to be quite blunt, extract the right labor out of these future esteemed colleagues?
Yeah, frankly, I don't know about how to kind of, if it's possible, even in theory. So we can put safeguards for professors, for presidents, for senators, for presidents of the country, everything. But it's sometimes they don't work. So I think the only real safeguard is that when we invite people here, we have offered them great opportunity for the research. Then I believe that this is the main attractive point for any serious scholar. So if I can imagine, biologists which will come here to Nike campus, they will. This is a lifetime opportunity for them, and this is what we are aiming for. So, and we have to watch out for people who try to make one move and second move, but people do that. We make mistakes, we just, say, thank you, we'll find somebody else. And golden parachutes, it's not my kind of, frankly, part of, I don't understand this anyway, how to deal with this. It's, there are, how to deal with this, I don't know.
Senator Koopman.
Thank you for your work putting this policy together. The questions I have, which are actually statements to my colleagues in the Senate. Of course, Boris, you've seen these because I've emailed them to you and they've been posted on the blog. Bettina, could we go down to paragraph 2.6, or whoever's controlling the computer there? So I have two suggestions that I emailed to Boris that I think would improve the policy, and one of them along the lines of what Dr. Fried mentioned, and I very much support the kind of concern voiced there. And to, I guess, frame the suggestions, I want to say something about the spirit in which I think we should be approaching this policy. I agree that the level of trust between administration and faculty in recent years has been on the rise, and to the credit of our current administrators. However, we're talking about policy that once in place will be difficult to undo, will set expectations, and will almost certainly outlast current administrators. And with that in mind, I think it unwise of the Senate to place the full level of trust we have for our current administrators in all future administrators. I would be very surprised if this campus at some point in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years doesn't mistakenly hire or doesn't hire, whether or not it's a mistake, some provost or dean or some combination thereof that wants to push through a hire too quickly, and in a way that would raise all kinds of flags that our current provost, president, and deans would not make the mistake of overlooking. So the worry is we're talking about a process for expediting something. We're talking about taking away safeguards that are already in place. And I think we need to be careful about the way in which we place our trust in future administrators whom we have not met. Because the Senate, we have control over this policy. We have say in this policy. And we're ceding ground or not based on what policy we pass. And we're ceding it vis-a-vis, again, future administrators whom none of us in this room have ever met and who many of us in this room, possibly all of us, will have no say in the hire of giving recent hiring practices of administrators. And we all know that we had a recent president not that long ago that at least I think some senators in the room would agree with me was not all that trustworthy. But there was a good hire process in place for that person. We just got somebody who wasn't solid. So with that in mind, I think we need to build in we need to more carefully build in safeguards in this process. So my suggestion, which I posted to the Senate blog, involved two changes, and they're both in paragraph 2.6. I take it they're relatively minor changes, but the first is replacing in the first line of 2.6, where it says such materials should generally include. I think the language should be such materials must include at a minimum. I think that's not only a way of building in a safeguard, but also a way of writing good, clear policy. I don't think terms like should generally include belong in policy because it's a cover or a front that people can use to, frankly, abuse the process. And I don't think abuse looks like people getting together and conspiring. I think it looks like people getting really excited about world-class candidates, or, Chris, in response to my comment on the blog, you mentioned potentially hiring former presidents or civil rights icons. I mean, really, we're going to hire former presidents here at UO? I don't know. But so people get kind of starry-eyed about the potential of hiring the best possible person in their field, and then they move very quickly, and sometimes too quickly. And I think I cannot imagine a case in which it would be slowing down things too much to make sure that we review at a minimum CV, relevant research materials, quantitative assessment of impact if available, and at least 3 external evaluations, which brings me to my second change. I think we need to strike from 2.6 in the third line, reports of oral recommendations made to the department. I think the external evaluations need to actually be external evaluations and cannot be me writing a letter to the Expedited Tenure Review Committee that, well, I heard very favorably about this candidate from people in my field, and it just so happens that I'm also the person who's backing this candidate and wants them to be hired. So here's my report, and use that, please, in lieu of an external evaluation. We need these external evaluations for reasons that Drs. Murray and Fried mentioned, amongst other reasons. And to create a process willingly here that does away with that altogether, I don't see any need for that, though I'm willing to be convinced that we do need it, but I would want to hear about a case in which it turned out this affected us negatively to not have this.
So frankly, I respectively disagree with you, but it's, I can see, theoretical case when we have here, a couple who applied together, and very competitive situation, and we compete with several other universities, and some other universities have much more power, and they give not just tenure, but maybe full professor promotion immediately, and we say goodbye to these people. It's I think it's something that I wouldn't worry about abusing. I would worry about not using this type of opportunities, because it's it's not easy to hire good people.
Thank you. I'm not clear on what in my statement you disagree with. I'm not making an argument against the policy. I'm making an argument on specific points that we need to build in safeguards. And so when you said you disagree, I assumed you disagreed with one of my 2 suggestions, but then I didn't hear any disagreement with those suggestions.
So I disagree with the word must. I think in the should, it's actually strong enough. So when we, so we have to include the case when it's urgent enough to make a decision.
I believe Senator Minton is next.
Chris Minton, National Sciences. This point's passed a little bit, but the question brought up by my senator to my left about if there's ever been cases or situations in which people turn it down because of this process. So when I was department head of human physiology, we had 2 circumstances where we were trying to bring in clinical practitioners who were from very large research universities and medical schools, and they had very little teaching, but they were preeminent as far as grant writing and publications and mentoring of students and those kind of things, but they did not have the classic teaching and other issues. And so the tenure process was one of the reasons why this endocrinologist and this cardiologist separately decided not to come to Oregon. And it wasn't only because of the U of O. They're going to have a split appointment between U of O and Peace Health. But part of the problem was going through the tenure process, they were concerned about the way that a university with a non-medical school would be evaluating their tenure and promotion. And the external letters created a little bit of a problem because these were people who were thinking about moving here and didn't want it out within their community, within their larger community of their discipline that they were looking. They wanted to be kind of guaranteed that they're going to have a tenure here at U of O before they committed to come here, because they didn't want to come here go through the process, have all kinds of problems, and really be questioned about what they're doing here. So again, it's not directly because it wasn't a pure hire at U of O, and there were some other reasons where Peace Health dropped the ball, I think, that led to it. But it was one of those other factors that led to what have been really excellent hires, I think, on this campus fall through. The one question I have, I guess, to go along with this is the comment was made about why would some of these people who are so preeminent in their field, why would they want to have tenure or go through the tenure process? I don't know the answer to that question, but I don't know if it affects what they would do, where they'd be placed in the CBA if they weren't in the tenure track or continued tenured, and how that might greatly impact their decision to come. That's just a question because I don't really know the answer to that.
Yeah.
Senator Wax.
Thanks. David Wax, Humanities. We can't be the only university that's facing this type of issue. Do we have any sense of what best practices are elsewhere?
Well, I talk to people, I know some people who are in charge of these type of things in Stanford, and they have completely different kind of, they have much better freedom to decide on that. I cannot, I didn't make a research on that. It's, I'm not sure it's actually necessary, frankly, because we have quite a unique situation because of Nike campus.
So I just talked with the provost, and he said that at the previous universities that he's been at and familiar with, so this would be Penn State, Maryland, maybe some other ones that I don't know, but they do have a system like this for offering tenure in an expedited manner. Just a second. So I believe Senator Phillips is next.
Yeah, Chris Phillips, Mathematics. So the comment was that the process should include approval or support by the provost, and it's not written in the motion as it stands there now. Could I ask that that actually be included when it's brought back at the next meeting?
Yeah, I think it's a very reasonable suggestion.
And I could like make one brief comment about the question of people coming for their last year or something like this and then retiring on large salary. I mean, it's generally, how do you know if somebody is going to do this? Well, maybe you might suspect it, and we hope that the department isn't going to try to hire somebody if they think they're going to do that. In fact, the math department did, in fact, consider somebody for whom ultimately the suspicion was that that was the sort of thing that was intended, meant that we didn't actually try to hire the person.
Yeah, that was not a while ago.
So Senator Davis and then Senator White.
Okay, a couple of things. It's already been brought up. The original thing I wanted to ask was about comparator institutions, and I think it would be really valuable for me and probably for a lot of us evaluating this process, and a lot of the concerns have been raised about the potential for abuse and having safeguards to know not just that the processes are in place at places like Stanford and Penn State that we might aspire to compete with, but the details of those processes. So it would be useful for me before voting on this policy to know what the policies look like at some of those other places, and perhaps even shape our policy as a consequence of some of the safeguards that might become apparent built into those policies in other places. Optimally, even, you would contact the people who do this work at some of our comparator institutions that we list for our own comparisons, and find out the details of the history of those policies and ways that they've been shaped over time by the potential for abuse or actual found abuses. And that way we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can just make ourselves competitive and then let them do all of the heavy lifting for us. So I think that would be really helpful for me if we could add that into the process before discussing and voting on the final version of this policy. The other thing I wanted to suggest was that there's a potential that if you're deciding not to hire someone because of their age, that might be against the law. So that's something that you might want to be very careful about discussing, and maybe not try to anticipate people's career decisions in that way. So thank you.
I will say that I feel like this the policy as written, or the proposed policy as written, kind of has the ultimate safeguard in the sense that the faculty group, the ETRC, and the ETRC only can insist that any candidate go back to the full tenure process. So I feel like that group has the ultimate power to say, no, we don't think this person is either, good enough for the process, or we are suspect, and we want to know more. So that's my own personal feeling. All right, so now I'm going to Chair of the Academic Council, White.
Thank you. Just a very quick comment in responding to, I think it was Colin's question about having the letters rather than the oral reports. Remembering that when hiring happens at senior levels, that it often involves a lot of oral reports, which really are not just, I think this guy is good, but an actual interview of the recommender by members of the committee, which then report back in written form to the full committee. And again, given the oversight process here, it will be ensured that those reports are true oral reports of full recommendations, and those things typically happen orally, not in written form.
Thank you. I'll take one last question from Senator Lin.
This is Washington from Math. I just try to have some clarification. So many people express their concern of possible abuse and so on. So I understand that the really difference here is about the tenure. So this guy is somehow department and so on will be hired anyway, right? As under this condition, that whether should be given a quick tenure review. Okay, am I correct at this moment?
So I think about so there could be very different situations.
So there is a process. Yeah.
It could be that the actual hiring will depend on this process. It could be that in the case of administrator, it would be probably secondary consideration for the administrator if he is going to go through tenure or not. So I think it's this is as usual in real life. There are many possibilities, and this is why I don't think there is possible to give particular list of that we have to put there.
Well, that's not exactly what I'm asking. So there is a process to hire anybody, say. Can math department hire somebody?
Yes.
And there is a process already going on. And we department vote unanimously to hire somebody, but also with the tenure. So it is that part we are talking about today, right? So we need to express that portion of it. So
but it has to be first approved by the dean and the provost,
yes.
And then it may become a part, and maybe not.
Yeah. So I understand that the people concerned is that portion. Not if there is no tenure, then nobody will really raise the issue. Am I correct? So if that's the case, then we are talking about the trust and so on. It's on that portion. So that's the person we will hire anyway. Okay, we already have the process. Or have certainly it will have a CV and everything else. And we will not hire anybody. Just say, okay, somebody there we hire. So there is a process already. Yes.
Yes.
So now it is expedition here is the concern. Okay. So now you have a committee and you have a department say recommendation, and the dean approve and the provost approve, and then also has addition have a part of the committee. I understand this is a sort of a subcommittee of the usual committee and make a review and a vote on it. Yeah. So I feel I will agree certain revisions, but in principle I think I support the idea. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Lin. Any non-senators have we have a senator who has another question.
I just want to go back to this concern about not having, potentially not having independent review, and looking at 2.6 and just wondering if there's a way to make clear that it's insufficient to just have letters selected by the candidate. And maybe the analogy to think about here is how we do good empirical work in science. It would be really a bad idea to test a hypothesis by going to sources we already know are going to support the hypothesis. It's our job to go to sources where we don't know and ask if our hypothesis is going to be rejected or not. And so it can be fast. It just doesn't have to slow anything down, but I do think it should be put into the policy that you have to go beyond the references selected by the candidate.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
One last remark from Senator Mobasar.
Thanks, Chris, and thank you, Ariane Mobasar, student member of the Senate. It's been interesting and a little bit disappointing to learn that some of these terms that we continue to use, academic excellence, top-notch people, best people in the world, the extent to which that those conceptions don't include values of teaching and excellence in the classroom. I think that's something that I and continue to learn. And I have concerns about this expedited process and the extent to which it reinforces sort of the undervaluing of teaching excellence in particular. I mean, when we use, there's been several times throughout both last time and this time that we speak specifically to the challenge of organizing their CV to fulfill teaching requirements, another issue that was just brought up about teaching in particular. And I guess my question is, my concern is around the potential this idea of their paperwork not being in the right order, being confounded with substantive deficiencies in their teaching. And to the extent that our faculty hiring sort of committees do already undervalue teaching, then this sort of expedited process is just business as usual. But as both an instructor and a student, I have concerns about that message that continues to be reinforced at the top about undervaluing teaching in particular.
So I would like to respond here because it's a year after year working on FPC committee that one of the major points of discussion was exactly teaching of everybody, in every case, and it was very thorough review every time. Moreover, we had to kind of we had lots of arguments about so maybe there is not good enough and everything else. So at least at this level, I don't believe we have a problem, and at the general FPC. So now, if we think about looking at the particular person with expedited tenure review, and then and it's clear that we have this person will teach, and so we'll have to kind of get evidence of his teaching excellence. If not, no teaching excellence, so probably this person won't be approached at all. So this is my understanding what is going on here. There is no easy way to put a safeguard that this person is a good teacher. So we may have a great teaching record, and then you see the person give a talk, you wonder what's going on. So it's so when we hire in our department, then we ask a candidate to give a talk in the colloquium, to give talk for the undergraduate students, and then it becomes absolutely clear what's going on. If it's lousy talk, the only thing I say to my graduate students, look carefully, don't do this to yourself. So, so there is every department, and I'm sure not just math department, we do care about teaching a lot. So, and then, so this is the part of the process. So, right.
Thank you, Boris. Any non-senators have any comments? Provost, Executive Vice Provost, you're good. John Bowen.
I'll just mention things. I can send these to you in email afterwards, but just so the senators also might think about these things. Certainly, it's important to obtain policies from other universities and to look at them and to see whether or not they're doing the same thing, different things, and to look at language. Has this gone through any Senate or university committee or only sort of an ad hoc committee? That'll be one of my questions. I'm just going to run down my list. Furthermore, with the current system, it seems to me we have had some rather expedited reviews, and the question is, what is the shortest time? Perhaps the Personnel Committee could answer this, in which, for example, a dean has been appointed and granted indefinite tenure, the president has been appointed and granted indefinite tenure, and is that going to be good enough? Because we do have a process of some kind. Next, there is a policy on tenure at the university. Wouldn't it be best that whatever new policy is made be inserted into the actual current policy rather than having a couple different policies on the books? That's just a drafting issue. I guess this one substantive issue is if someone has purely been a researcher up until this point and does not have a university background and pedigree in terms of their work, presumably what we're saying is we will give these researchers lifetime jobs and they cannot be dismissed without the full committee process. So that's something to be obviously.
Non-tenure.
Pardon me?
You mean non-tenure job?
No, I mean by giving them tenure, we're giving them a lifetime job. Yeah. And in addition, I just have these things that I would like you to take a look at in terms of the policy. If you could go to 2.1 at the top of the page of the resolve. The University Senate doesn't establish a policy. University does, but the Senate, it starts here that it's a drafting issue. Secondly, I'm curious why this is done only for full professors, and that would suggest skipping over 2 levels, and you might take a world-class 29-year-old and make them a full professor. I can imagine it, but that I note that this is in somehow granting not just tenure but rank, and I wonder if that's how that's been looked at. Third, on 2.3, the subcommittee sounds like they are members of the Personnel Committee, but then the criteria in the 3rd and 4th lines seem to involve people who perhaps are not. I don't know. That's a question, is whether you imagine people being on a subcommittee who are not on the Personnel Committee?
No, it's on
I
the
think
subcommittee of the...
that might be clarified a bit. Yeah. And finally, on 2.4, I presume that you're saying that people who volunteer for this, will they receive some summer stipend? Because if they're only paid 9 months a year, and you're saying they have to be available the whole year, so that's a practical thing to consider. And finally, of course, 2.6 with all some of the issues that Colin mentioned. Thank you.
Sure.
So if you send those to me, I will ensure that these questions are answered and put on the blog. Thank you, Boris. I'm going to cut the conversation short. I do want to say a few things. If there are things that you definitely want changed in the policy, the first place that I would suggest doing this would be on the Senate webpage. You can log in with your Duck ID and leave comments there. The reason I say to put it there is because it's publicly available and it's all in one place. However, you can also email me your comments and concerns, and I will ensure that the Provost's office and the chair of the FPC get these comments and concerns, and they will do their best over the next couple of weeks to change the legislation to be consistent with those suggestions if they feel that is the best way to go. And then this will be brought forward again. All right. Thank you again, Boris.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you. So now it's, as I mentioned before, I hope that we have enough trust in this university, and now I trust you guys, and you will figure out how to put the best way this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Boris. So next up is Next up is Dean Andrew Marcus from the College of Arts and Sciences, who is going to talk to us about some of the initiatives in that college and some exciting developments in shared governance.
Thank you, Chris. As I know from lots of time in the Senate, I think I'm starting right now after I was supposed to have already finished. So which version of this do you want? The 5-minute version? Yeah, okay, I'll go with that. One of the things I note, too, is that when I was in the Senate, back in the day, we were allowed to have cookies with the Senate. And then my greatest failure as Senate president was that we were banned from having cookies. And I learned just how much power I had. But now that we're in the EMU, I would like to propose, maybe as president, that you contemplate cookies with Senate meetings again. I think that would be a good move. And on that note, I'll say goodbye. Thank you. That's what I want to talk about really is looking to the future, about 5 minutes of that, rather than looking to the past, although I will take a little bit of time to talk about what we've gone through over the last 4 years to get us to this point. What prompts the comments I'm about to make today really came from an exercise that our provost gave us over the summer, which was to develop a vision for the college. And being an academic, I instantly went out and downloaded visions from a bunch of other universities. And when you look at College of Arts and Sciences, most of those visions are on the order of 80 to 120 pages long, and they talk about everything under the sun. And I found them utterly incomprehensible. So here's the vision that not just I, but a number of us talking together have developed for the college. And that vision is one that isn't a new vision. It's really an ongoing vision that captures what we've been doing and are doing at this very moment. So here we go. I'm going to actually read it out. By the year 2020, the University of Oregon College of Arts and Sciences will be a national leader among public research universities by virtue of its innovation in research and undergraduate education in 2 realms. The development of interdisciplinary nodes of research excellence that address major social needs of our time. 2, groundbreaking programs that guide students to academic and career success through the liberal arts. So once again, 2 key elements: interdisciplinary or collaborative nodes of research excellence that address major social needs of our time, and groundbreaking programs that guide students to academic and career success through the liberal arts. We're already doing a lot of this. We just haven't proclaimed loudly enough that we're doing it. Central to this, to both of those, are faculty at the core. And this is something I cannot emphasize enough. When I interviewed for the dean's job here now 2 years ago, I said that I think the single most important activity of a dean is to bring forward the collaborative excellence, the creative energies of the faculty, and let that come to the forefront. Well, both of these do exactly that, and I want to talk a little bit about that and the strategies that will follow to make this possible. So, how do you get to these 2 things to a note of actual national preeminence in multiple ways? 3 strategies that we'll be following. 1, targeted faculty hiring. There's no surprise in this to any of you. Our provost has talked about widely the idea that we'll have a new institutional hiring plan where everything moves up through to the provost for ultimate approval of lines that move forward. However, we're at a particularly special moment in terms of our ability to really enhance what we are doing already. So I talked about having preeminence in interdisciplinary nodes of collaborative excellence, or of excellence that address social needs of our time. But if I were in a department, as a department head, for instance, I'd be very worried that what about the core disciplinary needs of my department at that same time? The reason we're in a lovely moment is because we are going through a demographic bulge in our departments, where we're looking at about 4 to 6% of our faculty retiring or moving on each year. It's the baby boomers hired in the 60s, some in the 70s, who are beginning to look at that time to retire. And if we simply look at the numbers over the last 3 to 4 years, we're replacing 4 to 6% of our faculty across a faculty of 480 tenure track faculty, and even more across our 300 non-tenure track faculty. So this is a moment where each year we could be looking at 25 or so replacement positions that allow us to really be creative in terms of looking at new social issues that we can take on, while at that same time replacing core disciplinary needs. So why do I say that we're already doing this, and why am I so confident that we'll be able to continue to do it? First off, we are already doing it. It was launched initially through the clusters of excellence, of which 5 have been ongoing, and 4 have had profound impacts already in our college. In the past year, as we put out a call to departments for ideas to come forward, we received 8 proposals for these collaborative nodes. We selected 2 out of those 8 that we forwarded to the provost office, and 1 out of those 8 was funded. It was the data science for social equity cluster that's going on between geography and economics right now. The other one that we forwarded was one related to gender violence, and I will be re-forwarding that again because that group has already been in touch to let me know that that will be something that's forthcoming. We will be within the college pushing out the institutional hiring plan that our provost has given to us, but with some additional criteria, asking our departments to think in terms of ideas that will really support this kind of vision, of really taking us to the next level. Why do I say that this will still allow us to maintain our disciplinary strength? For example, the numbers. This year we have 42 searches underway at this very moment. Of that, about 10 are involved in clusters of one sort or another. 32 are still supporting the core disciplinary needs of our departments. So, strategy number 1, targeted faculty hiring. Strategy number 2, faculty at the center, and I should say diversity at the center as well. We are desperately in need of more support for our research faculty and for our instructional faculty in terms of their daily jobs. So, just yesterday I sat down with my development team, and we have been working very hard on how we target specific donors to specific initiatives. Those initiatives are in terms of enhanced faculty support, which would then allow us to maintain these collaborative nodes of excellence. Additional chairs, professorships, and fellowships. No surprises there. This is amazingly enhanced by the President's willingness to divert some portion of the $50 million he was just awarded to support chairs within all of the colleges, not just ours. Increased faculty research funds. I have been pushing very much for the idea that we will have what I call accelerator grants or bridge grants for faculty to really help us move forward. We are already in discussion with donors who are talking about potentially bringing forward millions of dollars that they would be willing to put into the university to support this. Third, in terms of enhanced faculty support, more PhD fellowships. We do better when our students do better. We need to provide more support for those students, and in collaboration with the graduate school, we will continue to try to move more of our funding internally within the university to graduate fellowships, and I will continue to try to find external funding to support that. Those are all supporting existing activities, so there's nothing particularly visionary about those. Every university in the nation is trying to do those. We're also very much wanting to get new programs that really promote faculty leadership within the college and within the university. First and foremost, as Chris alluded to, we want to start meeting with the Senate, we meaning the deans within the College of Arts and Sciences, with the CAS senators, at least quarterly for a period to discuss issues and ideas and potential input that you can provide. I see that as one meeting that then leads to additional input that moves outside that formal meeting that we will have. All of you who are within the College of Arts and Sciences should be expecting a note very soon from Lisa McShimisu scheduling that meeting sometime in the next several weeks as we move forward. Cultivating faculty leadership is also key amongst our younger faculty. And when I say younger, I mean it's associate professor level. Next week we'll be announcing, as soon as we get agreement with all the folks involved, 3 Dean's Fellows. These are associate professors who will become part of our CAS leadership team who will be working with us to pursue specific kinds of topics across the college that are in support of this vision. The third thing that is very faculty-centered is we want to replicate more in the humanities and the social sciences division what we already see in the sciences, and that is these kinds of intellectual hubs, centers of research excellence. One example that I'm very excited about is the Center for Environmental Futures that Marshall Weisiger in history and Stephanie Lemanger and English have brought forward, and we have a major proposal in front of the Mellon Foundation right now that we hope will support this. we anticipate more of these kinds of activities around digital humanities, disability studies, etc. I can go on with a long list of the ideas that have been brought forward by faculty. So, strategy 1, targeted hiring. Strategy 2, providing more support for activities like that, and then putting our development work behind it as well. The third big piece, the strategy, is how do we address this issue of student success through the liberal arts? Again, very much underway. We have Tykeson Hall as really the key piece, the centerpiece of that, where we're going to really reimagine career and academic advising coming together in one place. We have $34 million of $39 million already raised for that building. Groundbreaking will occur in December. So this is not just a pie in the sky fantasy. This is something that's already happening. I think the bigger trick for us, however, is something that will have to move to the Senate. We are really at a time, and this is my personal opinion, but I hope it's one that you will share, that I think we need to radically reimagine the curricula that we have across our university. I think that our students, when they come in, don't necessarily say, I want to be an English major, I want to be, in my case, geography major. They might say, I want to deal with issues of social equity, and how do we help community health? I want to deal with issues of health on a global basis. What can I do that will do that? I would hope that there would be really broad support in this group and a willingness to step into what will be very difficult discussions, because we don't want to lose our core disciplinary strengths in this process. But I would be very willing to bring my support behind whatever activities this body takes on, because I think that is what is going to bring students into this university and is going to ensure their retention, because they will be interested, their graduation, because they can't wait to get out and apply all of this. So, why can we do all this? Let me just briefly look backwards for a second. What has happened in the last 4 years in the College of Arts and Sciences? We've eliminated a major budget deficit. We've reorganized our administrative structures. We have collaboratively, I want to say when I say we, it's not pointed at me or just the other deans, created many enterprise-wide budget and personnel systems, the collective bargaining agreement being number one amongst all of those. We've undertaken the largest development campaign in the history of the college and raised $100 million of $140 million towards that goal. We've launched a program to reinvent student advising in the liberal arts. Some of you are in that already. We've acquired the funding to build this building dedicated to student success. We've initiated major science lab improvements across the college. We've begun efforts to reimagine our languages and humanities. And again, thank you for those of you in this room who've been part of that. And we launched last year a major online and curricular change set of programs. So when I say that we have this vision of becoming nationally known, renowned, this is not a vision that's something that's pie in the sky, as I said before. This is something we're doing right now. And I think what we have to begin to do is recognize in ourselves how really good we are at the moment within this college. And then secondly, begin to let people know about that. On that note, I think I'm done.
Any quick questions for Dean Marcus? If not, let's thank him. We'll thank him every time we have cookies, too. So you'll get lots of thanks. All right, moving on to our agenda, we have the Honors Task Force. Our members of the Honors Task Force are going to give an overview of what came out of that task force.
All right, well, thanks, Chris, for inviting us here to talk about the Honors Task Force and the report that it produced. We're going to move fairly quickly through this just in the interest of time, and also because this report is on the Senate website, so I encourage you to look at that. So the way we're going to do this, I'm going to give you a brief overview of what the Honors Task Force was, what we were interested in doing, and then some of the conclusions. And then Josh is going to take over and talk about the recommendations that the Honors Task Force made in the end. So first of all, what was the Honors Task Force? This was a joint Senate Provost Committee. It had 12 members on it. There were members from the faculty, administration, and a member from the student body. We met, and I want to emphasize this, we met under a very expedited time frame. So this committee was formed just before spring break last year, and we were asked to finish our work by week 10 of spring quarter. So we met 5 times during April and May of last spring, and also did quite a bit of work outside of those meetings in data collection and analysis. And the final report, as I said, is available on the Senate website. So what were we interested in doing? So our initial charge was to assess honors at the University of Oregon broadly and think about the future of honors at the University of Oregon. That was a pretty broad task, and given what I've already told you was our expedited time frame, in the course of setting up the committee, that charge got whittled down to a more manageable and specific set of items. So one of the first things that we really wanted to do, which we became kind of quickly aware needed to be done, was to just document the current landscape of honors programs at the University of Oregon. So I think maybe one of the more lasting things this committee necessarily did was to collect a lot of data, both quantitative and qualitative, and that's all in the report. Secondly, given that data, we were asked to think about whether or not the level and distribution of honors designation seemed appropriate. So, are too many students getting honors, basically, was one of the questions. Third, we wanted to think about assessing the extent of what we'll call honors clutter at the University of Oregon. So in 2016, the Clark Honors College had an external review, and one of the things that was pointed out in that review, one of the criticisms in that review was that we had what they called honors clutter at UO, and that we had too many competing honors programs. And so we wanted to think about that issue, and in fact, that external review recommended that the University of Oregon form a committee to think about that issue. So that was one of our primary objectives. And then finally, we were asked to provide some feedback on a number of specific questions regarding the Clark Honors College. Josh and I both did want to emphasize that we did not, as part of that, review the business model of the Clark Honors College or the kind of core faculty model of the Clark Honors College. That was not something that we discussed or made recommendations with regards to. Okay, so let me start by just talking about some of this data we collected and think about the landscape of honors at the University of Oregon. I'm just going to give you a real taste of this. There's a lot more data in the appendices to the report. So with the assistance of various groups on campus, including the Registrar's Office, the Clark Honors College, as well as the Provost Office provided a student worker to help us with this as well, which was really, really helpful. We were able to collect both qualitative and some quantitative information on honors programs at the University of Oregon. So, as most of you know, there are 3 primary routes to honors at the University of Oregon. There's Latin honors, which I think we're all sort of aware of. There's departmental college honors, which I'm just going to call DC honors going forward. These are honors programs that are that have specific requirements that are given by either departments or colleges, excluding the Clark Honors College, to earn honors. And then finally, there's graduates of the Clark Honors College. There is also, obviously, a number of societies on campus that are national societies for which the UO maintains a chapter, like Phi Beta Kappa. That was not something that we spent a lot of time on in the committee, instead focusing on these more UO-specific honors programs. Okay, so I think most of us know what the Clark Honors College is. Most of us have a sense of what Latin honors is. I think what became clear to us, where there was more confusion, is that a lot of people knew about their own department's honors program, but didn't really know about the landscape of those programs across campus. So where do those programs exist? So in the College of Arts and Sciences, most majors have a route to DC honors. I believe the final numbers were of the 36 majors in CAS, 31 of those have kind of an honors program. The business school has a college-level honors program, which is open to all majors. So there's 2 majors, so it's open to both those majors. School of Journalism and the College of Design, some but not all majors have a route to DC honors. And then music and dance and the College of Education do not have DC honors programs available. Okay. So let's get to this first question, maybe the broadest question you might ask, is how many students get honors at the University of Oregon? So we had data for 4 years, basically from the 2012-2013 academic year through the 2015-2016 academic year. And over that time, 14% of University of Oregon students earned at least one type of honors. If you split that out by the 3 types of honors I mentioned, 10% earn Latin honors. You should be happy I said that, otherwise you'd question my results, because that's by definition that 10% earned Latin honors. 5% of UO graduates over that period earned departmental college, these DC honors, and then 3% were graduates of the Clark Honors College. Over this time period, these numbers were pretty stable, so one of the things people were, asked us to look into was just, have there been trends in this data, and there really hasn't, at least over that relatively short time period. All right, so let me get to our first kind of conclusion. It's hard to say absolutely what an appropriate number of honors is, and especially without doing any sort of external comparisons, which we would have liked to have done, but given the time period we were under, that was not something we got to. But just looking at these numbers, the Honors Task Force concluded that on average, an honors designation is a reasonably rare occurrence that seems to be reserved for top-performing students. So the Honors Task Force did not look at these numbers and feel like they were inappropriate in any obvious way. If you could go back one slide. One way to think about this is, we know that the Honors College is very selective, and so 3% earn honors there. We know how Latin honors is done. It's made a scarce resource by that 10%. But we didn't really have a good sense of how many people were getting these departmental college honors. And so one concern was, boy, are lots or 30% of students earning departmental college honors? And the answer is no, only 5%. So again, you can go forward now. Again, this seemed like a reasonably rare occurrence. We say reserved for top performing students. One way, there's lots of ways you can kind of motivate that, but one way to think about that is that only 4% of UO students earn either Clark Honors College honors or departmental college honors and aren't also earning Latin honors. So most of these students are high GPA students as well. All right, we were also asked to think about the distribution of departmental college honors, and in particular think about the distribution at the rates at which they were given. So I gave you some aggregate numbers, but what if we look across departments? And in the appendix to the report, there is data on the percentage of majors in basically every major on campus that earn departmental college honors through that program, through whatever the relevant program is for that major. And what was, I think, encouraging to the Honors Task Force in looking at that is that those numbers seemed quite reasonable. Most departmental honors programs award honors to only about between 3 and 10% of their graduates. And that was, covering most of those programs. There are a few, a handful of majors that award honors at a much higher rate. And in a few cases, those seem to correspond to majors that also awarded departmental honors based solely on GPA. And that was something the Honors Task Force was somewhat troubled with, and Josh is going to talk more about that with our recommendations. On the other side, there were also a few programs that awarded honors at a much lower rate. And this also concerned us in that in some of those cases, the requirements for honors seemed to be sort of unreasonably high. And in some cases also, the honors program just wasn't advertised very well at all. So we had examples of honors programs that students just didn't even know existed. Okay. So let me get to this question about honors clutter. And in particular, when you talk about honors clutter, you're really talking about these departmental college honors programs, because that's where you see a diversity in a large number of programs. So there are, as it says up there, there's a large number of different DC honors programs, 35. And as I mentioned before, the external review of the Clark Honors College made this argument that the number and diversity of these programs can cause students to be confused and can also weaken the Clark Honors College by essentially creating competition. So we looked into this a couple different ways. So first of all, we looked into this, trying to assess how much variation there was across the requirements for different departmental college honors programs. And so in Appendix B of the report, you can basically find what are the requirements for every departmental college honors program on campus. And we were really interested in a couple things. One was looking at how much variance there is in those. And the idea there was really to think about if there are wildly different requirements for honors programs, then that would be evidence that maybe that could cause confusion among students. But then also we were interested in whether or not a large number of those programs had honors programs where the requirements seemed fairly weak, and that could cheapen what honors means. So that was the primary thing we wanted to look at in this lens. And what I think we were all pleasantly, I don't know if I want to say surprised, but at least happy to see, is that there actually is substantial similarity across departmental college honors programs. In the following sense, all of them require some sort of a GPA requirement, and then most of them require some sort of significant experience on top of that. So either a significant research experience or additional coursework. Just to put some numbers on this, 27 of the 35 programs require a thesis, and then a number, the ones that don't require a thesis, require either additional coursework or some kind of a research experience that wasn't thesis-based. So there did seem to be a lot of similarity across honors programs, which lessened our concern about confusion to students. Also, a number of these programs seem to be quite significant in terms of the requirements for honors, and I think that explains why not more students are earning departmental college honors, why that number is only 5%. We did, again, I mentioned this already, find a small number of programs that award departmental college honors based on GPA only, and again, Josh will talk more about that in our recommendations. All right, now there's another way to think about honors clutter, which is that even if these departmental college honors programs are really rigorous programs, as I've just tried to make the case, and even if they're fairly standardized, as I've just tried to make the case, you might say, well, do we really need them? So, who are these departmental honors programs really serving, and would the university miss these programs if essentially they disappeared or if there was a much smaller number of them? And in looking at the data, what the Honors Task Force came to sort of conclude is that these departmental college honors programs serve a really important group. And that group is a group that I'm going to call top-performing non-Clark Honors College students. So over 80% of the students that earn departmental or college honors are not Clark Honors College students. Okay, so obviously you could do both. And what we found is that, the clear majority of students that are earning departmental college honors are actually not Clark Honors College students. And as a group, this group of non-Clark Honors College students who earn departmental college honors are actually larger than the group of Clark Honors College students. They're about 50% larger. Also, these students are top performers, and you could think about this in a number of different ways, but one easy way to look at it is that these students that are not members of the Clark Honors College but do earn departmental or college honors, those students earn Latin honors at about the same rate as Clark Honors College students do. Okay? So in thinking about this group of students who are obviously served by departmental or college honors programs, it's not clear how these students would access honors-type experiences, so things like access to research or other advanced engagement opportunities, without some kind of diversity of departmental college honors programs. You could imagine a model where all those students were put into the Clark Honors College, but given what I just told you about how big this number of students are, the CHC is really not equipped to handle that level of students without some major changes. And also, and maybe more importantly, is that the Honors College may not be the right fit for all these students. So in the end, the Honors Task Force concluded that rather than honors clutter, there seems to be a healthy diversity of honors programs, and that diversity of programs serves a variety of top scholars on campus. Now, that said, improvements could be made, and in our recommendations, we'll mention some of those. Okay, so lastly, before we move to Josh, the Honors Task Force also discussed several questions specifically regarding the Clark Honors College. One of those was, how should the CHC grow its enrollment? We have the word how in italics there because this question was given to us in that way. Secondly, should there be a more accessible pathway to the CHC for continuing students? So right now it's pretty hard to join the Honors College if you're a junior at the University of Oregon, so should that be easier? We thought about that. And then also, how should faculty outside the CHC contribute to CHC students? It's a pretty broad question. On some of this stuff, we were able to reach conclusions and actually have some recommendations that Josh will detail. On other things, we did not reach consensus. You can see all of that discussion in the report. All right, so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Josh.
Great, thank you. Okay, so again, I think I just want to, we'll be brief on this in the interest of time, and I also wanted to remind you again that we're focusing in on this for one term, so these are obviously larger conversations that hopefully this is just the start of. So I'm going to go fairly quickly through these, and all of these are again detailed in the report. So first of all, given all the department and college programs, we want to recommend that basically there's some sort of standardization in terms of the requirement that different departments and colleges are actually being explicit in terms of what they're trying to do with their honors program, so that there's some basic principles guiding this. We also talked a lot on this task force about the connection between what's happening in the classroom and the research endeavors of the university. And so one of the ways that we really think we should move forward in terms of honors is that there is some sort of requirement that students who are obtaining department and college honors are somehow articulating what they're doing with the research mission of the university. And so that's often done with some sort of intensive research experience, a thesis, things like that. So really moving that direction. And then basically with the requirement then for each of these departments and colleges that they're explicitly connecting what they do in their particular discipline to these broad principles as a whole across the university. And I think one of the things that's important to recognize is that what is honors in one discipline may be very different from honors in a different discipline. How people connect with research in one discipline may be very different from another one. So I think we want to recognize the diversity, but also recognize that there is a way to actually articulate general principles for what honors means across the entire university, and then ask each program to connect with those. So as Jeremy was mentioning, there are a few departments out there that have an option for or a requirement if somebody gets a honors in that department that they're getting that through GPA only. I'll pick on my own home department, anthropology. There are two routes there. One is based on GPA and connecting with a thesis, doing a thesis related to research. The other option is GPA only, both GPA within the major and then GPA overall across the university. So one of our recommendations is for those small number of departments to eliminate that GPA only option. So we looked at this question about whether some departments may be offering too much or too many honors. So, but as Jeremy was talking about, most actually are offering a fairly, what we thought, reasonable number of students honors. But we were a little bit concerned on the other end of the spectrum, not really about honors inflation, but about honors deflation. So thinking about programs that don't offer students that option. So we really want those colleges, so School of Music and Dance, College of Education, several other programs, to really think long and hard about whether there is and should be an option in their department or college for honors and how that would fit with the broader principles across the university. We, and you probably can guess what we mean by this, by the word accurate. There's actually a number of different departments that don't seem to be providing fully up-to-date or accurate information, may not be consistently communicated. So I think we need to have a push across departments and colleges, making sure that the information that's being provided to students is accurate information about how that they can actually get honors. And that all programs should be thinking about communicating this. So a number of the students that we've worked with were ones that were in particular programs that didn't even know, that weren't communicating to their own students about whether honors was an option. So we want to make sure that certainly any program that is offering honors to students is communicating that information and accurate information to students. We also thought a good idea would be to have one central document that actually could be used by advising, by faculty, by various people across campus, that actually keeps up-to-date information on honors possibilities and how people can reach honors across the entire university. So not just that somebody would have to go to the department website, but there's some central place, whether that's a course catalog or somewhere else, where this information could easily be accessed. We talked a lot about the Honors College and this issue of alternative pathways. As Jeremy was mentioning, there actually is a pathway in the Honors College for students to come in later. That is not in their freshman year. But there's then the requirement that they're actually doing general education coursework. And in many cases, this would require students to back up and do more requirements, more credits in order to get through that particular curriculum. So we thought about whether it made sense to actually have some sort of easier pathway for people to join, say, in their junior year. This led to a number of conversations about really what students are getting from the Honors College, and some of the things that we recognize were really important is this cohort, this shared experience and general education curriculum, and things like that. So therefore, if you've got students missing that and coming in their junior year, maybe there are some benefits to coming into the Honors College, but they've missed some of the biggest benefits, so that seems problematic. So really our recommendation is, at this point, based on this level of study that we did in one term, the spring term, we don't see the real need based on where we are, what we see with the Honors College for students to be able to, I guess, for a big push to let students in an alternative pathway in larger numbers than it exists now. We talked about this issue of the size of the Honors College, and so again, as Jeremy mentioned, the way this was framed to us was how should the Honors College grow rather than, and it wasn't should the Honors College grow. So when we considered it as how should the Honors College grow, we really wanted to emphasize that this was a question about resources, which of course we're not allocating on any task force. But basically the point that we really wanted to make is that in order to grow the Honors College, there would have to be the resources available to be able to do that well. We also, when we're talking about the Honors College, recognize the different, I guess, the structure in terms of the number of faculty in different disciplines versus the students and their majors, and recognize somewhat of an imbalance in terms of, in particular, the science students, the STEM students in the Honors College with a relatively small number of faculty in the Honors College. So I think what we wanted to emphasize is just this importance of recognizing what the composition of the Honors College faculty is versus the student composition, and then the anticipation for where we're going to see growth in that. We also recognize this issue that most of the theses that are done by Honors College students are supervised by people outside of the Honors College. So we really need to think long and hard about what people outside of the Honors College are getting. That is, research faculty who are mentoring students who are Honors College students, but those faculty are not members of the Honors College. And we need to think about this very carefully, certainly now, but especially with growth of the Honors College. We also initiated this broader conversation about top scholars at the university and research opportunities, and just a few things that we wanted to emphasize is just really the importance of connecting what's going on in the classroom with the research mission of the university, increasing undergraduate research opportunities across the university, and especially for students outside of the Honors College, and then also that we should consider ways to connect these top scholars that are outside of the Honors College that Jeremy was talking about with students who are in the Honors College. So we had a number of ideas for possibilities of connecting those students, some related to things like the Undergraduate Research Symposium. We really want to emphasize again this necessity of sort of connecting what's being done on campus and recognizing that programs need to do what programs need to do and think about what's right for their particular students, but need to think about this in an overarching framework. And this led us to thinking about possibilities for oversight and possibilities for approval of honors programs across the university, but really no consensus here. So I think we all agreed that we need to have some sort of body that's overseeing this, but there's not an easy answer to this. So one possibility would be to have some sort of honors committee that's either independent, that yet is part of the Senate, or something that's more closely connected to the undergraduate council. That led to a lot of debate and not a whole lot of agreement about what we want to do. Is that the last one? Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
So there we go. Nope. I think in the interest of time, I'll take one question from Senator Frazee, but we have a number of students here who want to use the open discussion period, so I would like to make this as brief as possible.
Keith Frazee, Officers of Administration. Thanks to you both for your work on the task force. I think it's really important. I really appreciate that you addressed the perception of honors clutter and all of that as well in this. So particularly because in working in orientation, the task of synthesizing the many opportunities to incoming students is challenging at times. I'm particularly curious about your recommendations for support of honors students, honors college students, and other honors students. In my experience, I've recognized that while our honors students are exceptional, they also are under a great deal of stress. And is there in your recommendations a recommendation for support in other ways, co-curricular support, student services support that could come alongside some of these other programs, particularly if we're growing the honors college, can we also then grow some of the support for those students that may be high stress as well as high achieving?
Yeah, thank you for that comment. Is that working? That's working? So, I mean, we're fairly vague in terms of what we talked about with support, but I think really you raise a really good point in terms of the sort of interconnection between all these pieces with support, whether that's financial support, whether that's emotional support for connecting what's going on in the classroom with out of the classroom. I was a little worried in terms of putting this as a recommendation that a little bit self-serving, given that my in undergraduate studies as associate provost launched this new Center for Undergraduate Research and Engagement, and we're really focusing in on those very same things. So I would say really important point. It wasn't a big focus of this task force, mostly because of the interest of time. It's something that we have to think really long and hard about.
So let's thank Josh and Jeremy for the report. Thank you very much. The Senate will be working to operationalize some of these recommendations, in particular the elimination of GPA-based honors within departments. All right, so I'm going to move to open discussion, and I know there's a number of students here who want to have their say, and I apologize to them for the meeting running late. We talked about tenure more than usual. So anybody want to make a statement to the Senate?
Hello, everyone. My name is Xander Berenstein. I'm a biology and math double major at the University of Oregon. Sorry, I'm a little nervous coming here. I wasn't actually planning on being here, but I got out of lab, so yeah. Faculty and the University Administration has been painting a very optimistic picture of life on this campus. Unfortunately for myself and for many of my friends, we see a very different picture. From where we are, from where I am, and I also want to say that because the U of O Student Collective has been granted time to speak at the next meeting, I'm going to speak about my own personal perspective. We have seen access to this campus be less and less to lower income students through continuous tax hikes last year and the year before, through the mandate for first-year students to live on campus, which again puts a lot of stress on lower-income students. We have seen an increasing rise in white supremacy on this campus, and when I say that, I mean myself and others, we have seen hundreds, over 300 white supremacist, Nazi, fascist stickers all over campus in just the last year. This is not an exaggeration. We have seen actual Nazis last year show up on our campus, and then we were told that, oh, they deserve a platform because we celebrate free speech. and yet at the same time, student protests do not get the same kind of celebration of our platform, as we saw in this protest that I will be discussing. And last year, President Schill even tried to push a resolution to the ASUO Senate called Time, Place, and Manner that would officially restrict student protest on this campus. We have seen Muslim students get kicked out of their prayer space. We have seen This and so many other grievances and concerns and demands have been brought forth to the University of Oregon administration and faced with either getting ignored, dismissal, condescension, or flat-out opposition. For this reason, myself and over 80 other students on October 6th of this year, we took the stage during the State of the University Address, and we presented our demands in a very concise manner. What are being passed out right now are the demands that we presented at this protest. Every single one of these demands are demands that have, again, like I've mentioned, been presented. We tried other means to present them, and we were essentially left no other choice but to pool all of our demands together instead of working on them separately in our separate corners, and to present them in a way that we knew we would not be ignored. Fast forward to just a couple of days ago, myself and at least nine other individuals received a letter from the University of Oregon administration threatening us with a citation of a student code of conduct violation, and it claimed to be for disruption of a university event. The question that myself and others who have participated in this event, what we want to ask is, if President Schill ended up pre-recording his speech, sending it out to everyone with a uoregon.edu email address, and then even publishing something about it to the New York Times, was his platform really disrupted or taken away from him in any way, shape, or form? And then, by claiming that his free speech was being violated and that his platform was taken away, he is essentially distracting everyone from the fact that we have 22 demands that we have been working on for years that we are trying to go forth. We're not trying to take away President Schill's platform. We're trying to make sure that Muslim students on this campus can pray without getting kicked out. We're trying to make sure that Oregonians of low-income families can actually have a chance at an education. And as a result, 2 days ago, when I got this letter from the administration, I had allotted the time between 2 p.m. and 6 p.m. for working on my physics homework, which was due at 6 p.m. Instead of working on my physics homework, I was forced to seek legal counsel, to correspond with others who attended this protest, and basically worry about self-defense from the university instead of doing my academic work. So as a result, this resulted in a very real, tangible disruption of my educational experience. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Xander. My name is Caroline Crisp. I study philosophy here, and I have a minor in political science and in triple PM. I'm here to read for you what we sent to the New York Times, but we're not printed with. Students at the UO feel Schill's actions are disrespectful and apathetic to the common good. He refuses to acknowledge and address our list of demands. Instead, he continuously criticizes the means used to voice our concerns. We have no power, we have no platform outside social media. Our means to achieve our goals and be heard are different from the standards of an already powerful university president, because this is the only way we can get his attention. As Angelina Davis once said in an interview from the 1970s, when you talk about a revolution, most people think violence, without realizing that the real content of any revolutionary thrust lies in the principles and the goals that you're striving for. Switching the conversation to the means of power is manipulative and deceiving. The University of Oregon students refuse to be ignored any longer. He continuously criticizes the means. He uses that as an agenda to ignore us. Stop focusing on the means and focus on the end goal, the list of demands. President Schill has continuously ignored the concerned voices of the student collective. Last spring term, the LGBTQA+3 community on campus occupied Johnson Hall to protest the loss of professional support staff for their organization. Jensen's told the Daily Emerald, most of our students come to this campus because they think they're going to be queer-friendly, trans-friendly school. But when they get here, they are disillusioned to find that shit like this happens. The support staff has yet to be rehired, and students of the community face a disproportionate amount of disadvantages compared to other students on campus. Schill held a meeting with the protesters, but he walked out because he had to attend an administrative diversity training, and he would have had a better diversity training if he stayed with the students and further discussed their concerns. In addition to that, the student collective attended the University of Oregon Board of Trustees meeting to speak out against the 10.6 tuition increase that will be charged to the students. Our voices and concerns were once again ignored. The student collective tried using multiple ways to address the issues raised in recent events. We tried to meet with Schill under sanctions. However, he refused and continues to refuse to meet with us. He claims that he would not meet with us because of our disruptive activities. However, it feels like his actions are aimed to control the culture of the University of Oregon. He's not even here to hear us out.
So I need to interrupt real quick. It's 5 o'clock, and so I'm going to call this meeting to adjourn. However, the students...
We have one more speaker.
Yes, you may. We have a second?
Thank you.
Vote to extend. So all in favor of extending the meeting for the third speaker, please raise your placard. All those opposed? All right. Thank you. The motion carries.
My name is Dan Fielding, and I'm a graduate employee and student in the sociology department. I have been a member of the UO community for 4 years, and in that time I've seen 3 presidents. So I want to be clear that my particular complaints are not specifically about President Schill, but rather the office of president as a whole. In my time here, I've witnessed many attempts by the university president and board of trustees to circumvent the authority and strength of the faculty senate. As I'm sure you're aware, that is what the president is doing now, as has been so clearly laid out. I'm here today to ask 3 things of you. First, I'm asking that you, as a body, vigorously defend the power of the faculty senate and work to divert more power into the Senate and away from the president and board of trustees. As a democratic body, the faculty senate has historically demonstrated its support for students, faculty, and staff on this campus. This is only possible when we contest the actions of the president. Second, I'm asking each of you as individuals to place the burden of creating change on yourselves. I understand that contesting unjust power relations is scary. For many of you, it means putting uncertain tenure cases in jeopardy. You may fear alienating other faculty in your department. You may fear losing a job you rely on to support your family. But you must contest these situations anyway. You must do it in your classroom, in your meetings, and yes, even at protests. Students have historically borne the burden of risking their futures to try to make change. As you see today, they are doing so now. We have seen students bear this burden again when the UO Student Collective took the stage fully aware that the university administration would attempt to punish them. Students are doing what we can to try to create a university that is safe, equitable, and just, but we cannot do it alone. We require all of you to stand beside us. As individuals, you must work to build coalitions with students. Finally, and most importantly, if you do nothing else, I ask that you focus on the real issues. President Schill has attempted to distract from the demands brought to him by the UO Student Collective by discussing free speech. And let me be clear, he is creating a distraction. The UO Student Collective has real and legitimate concerns that must be addressed in order to ensure a safe, equitable, and just university. You've all been given this list of demands. Please look at them. I want you to read them. I want you to think about them. I want you to ask yourself why they are not already being implemented. Most of them are so simple. When the president said that he was so disappointed that he had to interrupt his announcement of the $50 million that we had been given, ask yourself why he wasn't also announcing that we would not be receiving a 10.6% tuition increase. Ask yourself that. Ask yourself why the president is not taking seriously the needs of students of color, of immigrant students, of poor students, and queer students. Ask why the president has not addressed the concerns on that list that we have about the continued laying off of contingent faculty and the reduced benefits to workers across our campus. Ask yourself, why has he not addressed these concerns? Read them and take them seriously. The Faculty Senate must maintain its democratic power. You, as individuals, must work to create a safe, equitable, and just university. And you must all focus on the real issues, the demands of the UO Student Collective. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate coming to the Senate and speaking with us today. And again, I apologize for the meeting running late. We will see some of you all again in 2 weeks where you will have the floor. And we look forward to discussing your demands and having a nice back and forth. Thank you again. The meeting is adjourned.